when he was young, he couldn't take long because he had to be careful. Well, we're talking about 100 years of agriculture on this particular farm. And we aren't going to get much older equipment than the old farm wagon behind us. Not quite as old. We got Francis Hill, a local lad who's been in the agricultural business in the sales side about 40 years, I believe.
That's correct.
And we're going to use you to our advantage today to give us a few details about things. Now, I remember these old carts well, but you reckon this one was probably made locally, Francis?
I'm not absolutely sure, but it's highly probable this was made by Wensley's or Days of Mark, than the adjacent village down the road. They made wagons of high quality before my time, but in the early 1900s, and they did in fact export them. You know, quite a lot of countries in Europe had them.
Well, like yourself, I've seen them made. And I was only talking this morning about those old shafts. One of those shafts would have been made out of one piece of wood, despite the curves in either direction. And it was hand-sawn without any electricity available.
Correct.
We have here a draw bar where it's made available to a tractor, but originally we'd have had the horse in there, wouldn't we?
Yep.
Now these things...
hay ladders, or hay rays as they were known as in this locality.
We call them racks up on the mend.
Racks up on the mend,
Yeah.
right. Well, they all had local terms.
Yeah.
I've heard them called raves as well, but not in the term that we might think of today.
But all the styling of these things, although they were purposeful, they were beautiful and artistic, weren't they?
Craft.
They're beautiful things. And the old wheels, people will give a lot of money for just one wheel now, won't they?
Yep.
And I was once at a museum, and the chap at the museum was showing some children around, and he was telling them about the steel bonds. And quite honestly, he didn't have a clue on how these bonds were put on. Now, you can remember, I expect, your local blacksmith bonding?
My grandfather actually did it.
Did he really?
He was a farmer, and he kept a carpenter on full time. That was my mother's father. He shod horses himself for the local people, and they used to build the wheel in the carpenter's shop.
The wheelwright shop.
The wheelwright shop. Yeah. Bring it out, heat up the iron bond in the forge on a steel plate.
Yeah.
And then when the bond was red hot, drop it over the wheel, 3 or 4 men pouring water on to cool it down.
That was our job as kids in the local garage, going around with the water. And it's lovely to see it. I mean, there's some good bonds on that one. Of course, they would shrink on there. And
they would shrink and hold the wheel together.
Yeah. But it's wonderful stuff. And what else can you tell us? This is the old drug shoe, yeah, that would put under the wheel for downhill.
That's not quite a drug shoe. That is a roller that went down on the ground and would roll on the ground as well, which was all right on a smooth surface like a tarmac surface.
He'd run.
But most of them had what they call a drug shoe.
Like a cheese shape.
That the chain would let it go under the wheel, and then it would just be dragged along with the cart with the wheel not turning.
And not long ago, I was in Dorset on a steep hill there, and there was an old plaque on the side of the road that was ordering people to put their drug shoes down on that particular hill.
Oh, yeah.
But drivers wouldn't know what you're on about now. They just drop down a gear and that would be it.
Yep.
But she's a lovely example of an old cart.
It is, and it's still very sound.
I'd call it a hay wagon. What would be the correct term of it?
Well, if you go back to the Constable paintings, it was called the Hay Wain.
The Hay Wain, of course it is. That's a wonderful reference to it.
Yeah.
Okay then, we'll move on.
Right.
So what have we got here then, Francis?
Well, that would have the wagon would have been the very early days of haymaking, when they would have pitched it onto the wagon with pitchforks and pitched it off again onto the stack.
Of course, you never see a hay rick now, do you?
No.
Not as such.
No.
And our fathers, and ourselves too, have been involved in haymaking when you had the skillful man up there making the rick so that it didn't fall down.
That's right.
And then the thatcher come along afterwards to put a roof on it.
If a man built a rick and it did fall down, he'd have to move out the village, wouldn't he?
I was once nearly forced to move out of the village because I drew a cartoon of a man who let the rick go down, and he nearly drove me out the village for that, but that's another story. Right, this is phase 2.
This is phase 2. They would have then, with a hay sweep, have brought the hay into here, perhaps 2 men pitching it there, and then perhaps 2 men on the rick putting it around and making it. Usually one forking it to the man who actually made the rick and made the edges.
And did you ever do double pitching? My mate and I, we used to get one each side, double pitching and load it up.
Oh, into here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Double pitching. And that used to eventually jam up the poor old chap on top of the rick, was invariably the farmer who say, "You chaps better take it easy a minute and have a drop of cider."
Or words to that effect.
Or words of that effect. Well, that's lovely. Okay, we'll move on now. We're going across to the hay sweep now. Now these old sweeps were originally horse
Yes.
drawn, weren't they?
The early sweeps that I remember would have been a lot smaller than this,
Yeah.
probably only about 6 foot wide. The tines would have been shorter, with 2 handles on the back going like that. The man behind, the horse in front, we'll start at the beginning, with 2 chains coming back to the outer edges of the main beam. And then when the man got to the elevator, all he did was just lift the sweep slightly. That would mean that the tines would dig into the ground.
Up he'd roll.
The sweep would roll up over the mound of hay, down on the ground again. He'd go round the mound and on out to get another lot.
And with the tractor, of course, they pushed it in and just reversed and...
Yep, this sort of came in the 20s, I would think. But again, it was very slow progress in mechanisation in farming in those times.
Mostly it was just to adapt the horse-drawn stuff to a tractor, wasn't it?
That's right.
Nothing purpose-built.
These sweeps were more commonly used in the 30s when farming became a little bit more prosperous.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the 40s really brought it all to light. People
with the 40s and oncoming of the war, we were forced to produce more on the farms then, and we had such luxuries on the farm called land girls and things like that. You didn't have anything to do with them.
Well, they were a bit old for me then. The thing was, that was the first time that farmers had a bit of disposable cash, that they could buy some things, but also, of course, there was a shortage of labour due to the man being called into the services.
With the old Fortune tractor, that's about the most common tractor that was in use before the war, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they used to come out in orange before
the
war, and then because of the being spotted from above, Fords painted them green, didn't they?
Right.
And that would be an early one, because during the war they cut the mudguards back, didn't they?
Right.
To a narrower mudguard to save metal.
Yeah.
But I love these old Fords, and let's go and have a look over the old tractor.
Right.
There we go, no 4-cylinder engine.
Yep.
Start on petrol.
That's right.
Run on TVO.
Yep.
Start on the handle.
Yep.
Eventually.
Yeah.
And then you used to sit up on the seat there, trying to get in gear for about 10 minutes.
Well, that was mainly because the clutches were a bit suspect, they're subject to abuse by farmers, and then the clutches would get a bit difficult to operate. But when they were new, the clutches worked all right.
Yeah. Well, I drove one of these in a quarry as a chaseide with a mechanical shovel on.
Yeah.
And you've got the drive down here for driving your machinery and the power takeoff for it. But what I thought was lovely and simple about them was the fact you only had, now she's got the pedal pen down there, that's because the brake's on. There's only the one pedal for the clutch and right down for the brake.
Yep.
And of course you'd have a hand throttle on it.
Yep.
And just a 3-speed gearbox over there.
That's right. It had to be simple because the farm workers of the time they were frightened of them.
That's right. They weren't brought up in a mechanical age, and if you had to do too many things at once, they had a problem.
Oh gosh, this was a major step forward.
The old standard Fordson was the forerunner, I think, of all our tractors. In fact, I have heard the Fords were the first tractor builders to build a tractor that was built upon the engine or unit construction, the engine and gearbox. But before that, they had these old chassis like the old International Titan sort of thing, with a stationary engine cocked on the top.
Yeah.
Okay then, well, let's move on. Okay then, Francis, now tell us all about this particular bit of machinery. It's been painted up nicely.
Yes, this has been restored quite nicely. It is in fact a Massey-Harris Dickey haymaker. They called it a swath turner because that was its main function. Each of these rotors would turn the swath over onto dry ground. But you could also, by changing these levers and put one rotating inwards and the other one rotating inwards, you could in fact turn 2 swaths into one and put just, ready for picking up with the elevator or the sweep. Yeah. So it was a dual purpose machine, but its primary function was as a swath turner to turn it over, get the butts up and get them dry, as they say.
Yeah, turn it over and dry it.
Yeah.
So I want to do that today, I expect.
That's right, any minute now.
That's the swath turner. Now we've got
This one is known as commonly known as a tedder.
Tedder, yeah.
This one only works in one way, that it actually back kicks only, and will therefore just chuck the grass up in the air. The principle is that the heavier grass, wetter grass, would land on the top of the lighter grass because it would cast further.
Go further.
And therefore it would just help the drying process.
But just like we go around and toss things in the air
Exactly,
to dry them
with
down.
a pitchfork. There were several versions of this type of machine. Some of them actually brought the swath right under and up over under a metal.
And of course, originally these would have been with the shafts for horse drawn.
Yes.
And the old tin seats that we used to see
seat
so
on.
many of.
I think this one was in fact only a tractor version, but they were
A similar
used.
principle.
That's right.
Right, we move on.
This machine was basically known as a side delivery rake, but it could also be used as a swath turner. The two arms just go round and round and round and round, bringing the combs across like that.
Yeah, you can see it would go to the angle there.
And you could take out the centre section here of each one, so that it enabled you to turn two swaths, just to keep them as a swath, and just to turn them as the Dickey swath turner did as well. It was a combination machine.
But these weren't so common on the farms, were they?
No, this
is a more sophisticated job.
It is a bit sort of more sophisticated than
most
most
I don't
of them.
recall this type so much as the old tedder and the swath turner you got there. And is this a similar machine?
This is another of the a variation on a theme, we'll say.
Yeah.
This is again a swath turner and side delivery rake. You can use that unit there and take out these sections here and use the end of that section just to turn the swaths, and then you can disengage that unit and just use this one to put two swaths into one for picking up with a hay sweep or hay loader, whatever, in later times with a pickup baler.
Great stuff. Now then, tractors. I'm sure you're quite happy with all these old tractors.
Oh, I am.
Case. What year would this one be? Because we didn't get many cases over here until the war, did we? The East End.
This is a Case Model D, which was a very popular size of tractor.
Yeah.
And this would have been imported into this country from America during the 1940s.
Yeah, because we had this lease lend agreement.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some people listening today who probably aren't aware what that was. It was a hire purchase agreement, more or less, we had with America, which took us a long time to pay it back, didn't it?
I expect we've just about finished paying for it.
You and I, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Case, a great firm in America, isn't it?
Jerome Case, who was the man who started the company, was a fantastic man. He was a Scotchman who emigrated to America and made thrashing machines to start with. He then got onto steam engines.
The old steam engine.
And then the tractors came as a later part of the huge company. In fact, the company has gone right through now, and I've been selling Case tractors for the last 30 years.
Have you really? Oh, well,
so it has great attachment for me.
Yeah.
But Case is now amalgamated with New Holland because of the times that we're going through.
Yeah.
So, you know.
But a great firm, and I can always recognise them, not for brilliance, but because they're all the same colour.
That's right.
That's one easy thing about recognising tractors, I think.
Alice Chalmers had a similar colour, but
bit different.
A bit lighter.
Yeah, a bit different.
Yeah.
Now that we're going over to something made by the International Harvester Company,
Yeah. Well,
the old McCormick.
International. This is one of the very earliest pickup balers.
Yeah.
There were hay balers before this that were stationary, which we shall see later on, where you had to fork it into the baler and then two men were operating the tying of the baler. But this was an automatic tying pickup baler, and this was one of the very first ones that I ever remember in the early 40s.
Early 40s, you'd say that was.
Yep.
And that's International's own little engine in there? Or?
Yeah, that was the same engine that they fitted in their very small tractors.
Yeah.
There was a B45 baler came at a later date.
And that would have been made in Great Britain?
It was assembled in Great Britain, but I think...
We'd find that with the B, because that was something I have learned over the years about International. Some were made over here, and they were the ones with the B, the B models in front of them.
Well, all of the tractors where you have got a W6, and then you've got a BW6. It will be a British-built tractor.
British-built tractor.
They were actually built at Doncaster.
That's right, yeah, up at Doncaster. Well, we're talking again about a couple of names that we've already mentioned. We've got another International McCormick tractor here, slightly bigger than the last unit we saw, and a bit of New Holland equipment on the back. So come on then, Francis, give us a talk round on this particular one.
Well, of this era, this is a 1940s tractor, and the McCormick company was one of those that had a vast range of everything. They were they manufactured everything that a farmer would want, and this was their sort of biggest tractor. But the range at the time consisted of the W4, the W6 and the W9. We shall see a W4 later. There is not a W6 here, but they all look the same, but just more and more power.
Grow them up a bit.
This was about 40 horsepower, which in those days was considered to be massive.
Pretty big, yeah. Nothing like the tractors we see on the road today.
Generally
what we got on behind?
Yep. This is the New Holland 76 pickup baler with a Wisconsin...
So here we are going into baling instead of haymaking.
That's right. But no, this is baling for hay and straw.
And straw, yeah.
But this is of the same vintage as the 50T that we've just looked at, the International baler in Netherfield.
Yeah.
I have a lot of vivid memories of operating one of these because my father bought one of these in about 44, which not many farmers actually had a baler in those days. It had a few bad characteristics. The heck of an appetite to it, but it used to jam up if there was any wet grass at all. It would wind round the bearings on these canvases and give you, the operator, a fair bit of torment. And when they used to jam up, they would very often stall the engine. Well, then you'd have to start the engine, and then the baler being jammed up, you'd have to get rid of the wad of stuff that was in there. To do this, it was common practice to actually get the engine started, and then by operating on these two belts, you could do this and wind it backwards
to free it.
To get the ram back at the other end of the stroke, to actually then give it a good old start on the hand clutch here to get it going again.
This is where farmers got all their bad language from in the 40s, is it?
Exactly. I mean, my thumb went round that pulley more than once, and the starting handle used to come off and hit you in the chin.
We won't go into the replies from that one either.
No, that was where we learned to speak French.
Well, there's a little gem from the 40s coming into 1940.